Discover how the Marquess' unexpected love for his invisible sister changed everything forever. In the small New England town of Maplewood, the sun cast a warm glow on the painted murals of Sara's vibrant artwork, clashing with the opulence of the Marquess estate looming just beyond. The Marquess family, draped in wealth and expectations, were revered and feared, but for Carol, a hard-working single mother, every day was a mountain to climb. Balancing 2 jobs, she worked tirelessly while nurturing her spirited 12-year-olds, Sara and Tommy. With dreams as bright as her artwork, Sara often spent hours in her room, pouring her heart into her sketchbook, hoping to create pieces that spoke to the world beyond their modest home. On the other side, Henry, the Marquess's eldest son, walked the same streets but under a cloud of suffocating expectation. While Sara's art breathed life into their town, Henry felt trapped within the gilded cage of his family's power. He watched from afar as her murals blossomed against the bricks and mortar of Maplewood, capturing emotions he himself couldn't express. It was during these stolen glances that he stumbled upon the secret of his invisible sister, Grace, hidden away from sight and open hearts, deemed flawed by their family's rigid standards. As their paths began to intertwine, Henry's latent bravery sparked. Driven by an unshakable urge to connect, he reached out to Grace in secret, sharing whispers and laughter that broke through the silence of isolation. With each conversation, Henry discovered Grace's incredible strength and resilience. In contrast, Sara grappled with prejudice at school, her art challenging social norms while others looked on with judgment. Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As Sara's latest exhibit gained momentum, it revealed the beauty of diversity alongside the harsh reality faced by those dismissed by society. It fueled heated debates among the townspeople, who found their comfort zones challenged. Meanwhile, Henry's bond with Grace deepened, inspiring him to confront the very traditions binding them all. The turning point approached swiftly when Henry stood firm against his family at a charity gala meant to shine the Marquess's image. With a shaking voice, trembling hands, and the weight of 1,000 eyes upon him, he revealed Grace to the world amidst a sea of champagne flutes and forced smiles. Gasps echoed through the hall, the tension was electric. Carol watched in disbelief as her children took a stand for inclusivity, their futures blending into something far greater. The room teetered on the edge of transformation, a moment pulsating with potential, yet fraught with uncertainty. Hearts raced, breaths held. Would this act of love break barriers or solidify them further? As Henry stood steadfast, glancing toward Sara, the entire community waited to see if the love for his sister could dismantle generations of silence. And just like that, Maplewood held its breath, on the precipice of a daring change. How far would they truly go to embrace a new beginning? The gala hall quieted, but whispers erupted as the shock lingered like smoke in the air. Henry stood tall, anchored by his unyielding commitment to Grace and the hope he had for a more compassionate Maplewood. The moment felt surreal, as if time itself held its breath, waiting, expecting, daring. Grace shifted nervously at Henry's side, her face a canvas of confusion and vulnerability. She glanced at the astonished faces around her, witnessing a blend of horror and awe. Her heart raced, reverberating with the pulse of newfound acceptance and lingering doubt. Would they truly see her? Or was she just a spectacle, an object of their misplaced sympathy? Sara, from her distance, could feel the electric energy crackle around her. She wanted to rush forward, to wrap her arms around Grace, but fear gripped her. Would the townspeople embrace her sister or take a step back into their comfortable ignorance? Would the brave act of Henry's heart ignite empathy or allow the divide to grow? The Marquess family stared, their lineage and pride on the line. Murmurs flowed like a tide through the crowd, laced with irritation and intrigue. Lady Margaret, their matriarch, rose with an icy demeanor, fingers delicately clutching her sparkling necklace. "This isn't the place for such revelations, dear Henry," she reprimanded, her voice dripping with disdain. "You need to understand, we have a reputation to uphold." But Henry's gaze didn't falter. "No, mother," he countered, a quiet fury simmering beneath his calm surface. "We have a responsibility to show love and understanding. Grace is not a secret to hide but a sister deserving of our support." His voice rose, ringing with conviction, shattering the fragile air of decorum. Night wore on, filled with tension as the crowd wrestled with the implications of Henry's words. Faces turned, opinions danced, and emotions mingled in the undercurrent. People were confronted not only with Grace but with their own beliefs. Was it time to change? Was it time to embrace the invisible among them? Carol felt a ripple of emotions crash around her as she watched her children face a world most adults feared to challenge. She stood rooted, pride and apprehension battling within her. Every fiber of her being wanted to step forward, to support the fight for love, yet something held her back, the weight of history, of opposition to come. And then there he was, Tommy, her bright-eyed son, moving instinctively toward Sara. He took her hand in his, a gesture of unity that sparked tears in Carol's eyes. "They're talking about you, too," he whispered, and Sara felt a weight lift from her heart. Together, they belonged not only to their family but to something greater. As Grace struggled to process the swirling remarks around her, something shifted within the crowd. A few hesitant individuals stepped forward, their expressions softening. "I just didn't know," one woman finally spoke up, her voice trembling slightly. "And if I'd known," but before she could finish, a voice echoed from the back of the hall. "Are you saying she can be accepted?" A palpable tension hung heavily in the room, like the stillness before a storm. As questions hung in the air, the conversations erupted, igniting curiosity and fear alike. Would Maplewood begin to evolve, or would they cling to their long-held beliefs, despite the truth hovering right before them? The course ahead was unsure, chaotic, and filled with possibilities. Yet, in that moment, beneath the opulent chandeliers, an awakening began, a whisper of change that could unravel centuries of silence. Would this gathering help them see beyond their prejudices, or would fear seal their hearts shut once more? All eyes turned, waiting for either retreat or a bold embrace of the future. Shattered silence engulfed the gala hall, and for a second, it felt as if everyone was holding their breaths. Grace's heart thumped hard in her chest, her senses heightened. She could feel every gaze, every whisper laced with doubt or curiosity, and it weighed upon her like a cloak of lead. She was painfully aware of her vulnerability but also gleamed with the soft glow of hope flickering within. As the murmur of the crowd reached a crescendo, Henry stepped forward, unwavering, his presence like a sturdy anchor in tumultuous waters. "It all comes down to choice," he announced, voice steady and clear. "Do we choose acceptance, or do we choose to keep hiding behind walls of misunderstanding?" His question hung thick in the air, and as more faces turned toward Grace, she dared to dream. Would they choose to see her, not just as Henry's invisible sister, but as Grace? Suddenly, a stout man, clearly unsettled, pushed his way forward. "This is absurd," he retorted, his words dripping with disdain. "She's not one of us. What do you expect us to do? Open our arms?" The crowd responded with a mix of exasperation and fear, but it was Sara's voice that broke through the chaos. "Why not?" she called out, stepping beside Henry with a defiant posture. "What have you lost by embracing her?" There was a flicker of acknowledgement, even among the skeptics. Conversations began to shift from whispers to more audible disagreements. Carol could hardly believe what she was witnessing. Her children had become the new force of courage she always dreamed they could be. An older woman, her weathered face framed with white hair, raised her voice next. "If we don't stand together, we're doing a disservice to ourselves," she said, her once stern countenance softening. "How praiseworthy would we be if we turned our backs on family?" Grace felt warmth in her chest. It wasn't just Henry and Sara who were stepping up, others began to find their own courage. One by one, Voices began to rise from the crowd, converging into something more than a simple conversation. It became a movement. But what if it's wrong? Someone piped up hesitantly, a young man with an anxious expression. What if we're all being misled? Isn't it worse to close our hearts? Lady Margaret interjected, a hint of frustration underlying her previously icy demeanor. If anything, our compassion could mend this divide. As Grace stood there, a sense of belonging surged within her. She was not just a hidden secret but someone deserving to be part of the fabric of Maplewood. It was an exhilarating thought and a terrifying one, but she was ready to embrace it. The moment caught her off guard when Henry looked directly at her, his eyes shimmering with affection and confidence. You are worthy of love and acceptance, Grace. You belong. We will fight for you. As tears brimmed in Grace's eyes, she knew she wasn't alone on this journey. The crowd's sentiment had shifted, but it was raw and unsteady, a combination of hope and fear. The taste of change lingered in the air, sweet yet daunting. Yet, just as the clouds of possibility gathered momentum, a heavy-set figure appeared in the doorway. Mayor Thompson. His expression was carved in stone, and his presence seemed to suck the air from the room. All chatter faded, and anxious anticipation fell over them once more. What do you plan to do? He asked, his voice commanding but unsure, eyes scanning the assembly with skepticism. Everyone held their breath, the fate of Maplewood hanging by a thread. Was the moment of truth upon them? Would they face the collective reckoning of their choices now? In that charged atmosphere, Grace's heart raced again, but this time it was mixed with fierce determination. What would happen next? She could feel the stirring winds of change, and it filled her with a yearning for what could finally be. The tension in the room was palpable, almost crackling like static in the air before a storm. Grace's heart pounded against her ribcage as she held the gaze of Mayor Thompson. His presence, suffocating and imposing, pushed against the fragile hopes that had begun to bloom. What do I plan to do? The mayor repeated, his voice laced with a mixture of authority and uncertainty. You think that a few words of support change anything? This is tradition we're talking about. His comment struck like a blow, and the room quieted, everyone weighing the power of his words. But then Henry stepped forward, unwilling to let fear dictate the outcome. Tradition doesn't have to mean exclusion. He declared, voice rising above the whisper of doubt. We can't hide behind outdated notions any longer. If we want a community that thrives, we must be willing to break those chains. Grace watched as the expressions around the hall shifted, eyes wide, uncertain, some sparked with defiance. They were wrestling with a decade of deeply embedded ideals, and perhaps, that was a necessary struggle. A soft voice broke through the murmur. Yes, right, spoke the grandmother who had grown softer with her previous wisdom. Change is scary, but isn't it worth it for a chance to love our own? That was enough. Like a wave, others began to find their words too, voices rising in a chorus of defiance against the old guard. We can create a new tradition, one that includes everyone, a young woman chimed in, her face reflecting the courage she was finding in this moment. Yet the mayor held his ground, shaking his head slowly, as if trying to dispel this newfound courage with skepticism. And what do we gain, really? What proof do you have that this will work? Henry took a breath, grounding himself like he was preparing to leap into the unknown. What gain is there in silence? We stand to gain a community that embraces every part of itself. Think of children, people who need to see love over hate. Grace felt a rush of gratitude. Henry was fighting for her in ways she never imagined possible. She lifted her head slightly, a quiet resolve building within. In the back of the hall, a ripple of applause broke out. It was too loud at first, just a few brave souls clapping, but then others joined in, uncertainty giving way to something powerful. Grace's heart soared. Voices began to unify in agreement, all echoing a longing for acceptance, a yearning for connection. Finally, the mayor faltered, sensing the tide turning. But this isn't just about you or me, he stated, his tone straining against the growing momentum. This is about all of Maplewood, yes. Grace interjected, feeling the words burst from her lips. And the Maplewood I envision is one where no one is invisible. That's the beauty we have to harness. In that moment, she stepped forward, fueled by the support of her brother and the townsfolk who began to rally around her, this unexpected sister who had been shadowed for so long. Her voice trembled but remained steady as she addressed the crowd. I may have been invisible, but I am here now. I am just as much a part of this community, part of your lives, and I want to build something beautiful with all of you. Together. A murmur of agreement surged through the hall, and for the first time, Grace didn't just feel like a whisper in the wind, she felt like a roar, a force too strong to silence. But as the applause began anew, Mayor Thompson shifted his weight, his expression darkening. You all tread a dangerous path. His voice dripped with foreboding, leaving an air of uncertainty hanging ominously in the atmosphere. Grace felt a shiver run down her spine. His warning felt like a threat, leaving her pulse racing with apprehension. What kind of danger could lie ahead? As the applause filled the hall, uncertainty loomed large in Grace's mind. Would they remain united in their choice, or would the shadows of fear and tradition drive them apart once more? The air thickened as she braced for what lay ahead. The applause slowly faded, and silence blanketed the hall. The air was thick with anxiety and anticipation, making Grace's heart race. She locked eyes with Henry, who offered a nod of encouragement, his face etched with determination. It was a small gesture, but it gave her the strength she needed. Mayor Thompson straightened, swallowing the overwhelming noise around him. You talk about beauty and inclusion, but can you promise it won't lead to chaos? He challenged, leaning forward as if trying to intimidate them into submission. What if Maplewood refuses to embrace this change? What if we lose everything we hold dear? A murmur spread, uncertainty swirling like smoke. Grace could see the doubts creeping into the hearts of her neighbors, wrapping around them like vines. But at that moment, she decided to let her voice rise above the doubts. Change is often difficult, she spoke firmly, her voice echoing off the walls. But isn't it worse to stay stagnant, to watch so many of us fade away? Fear thrives in silence, but love can flourish in openness. We have to choose unity over division, now more than ever. The shift was palpable. Gray-haired men and women leaned in, drawn to the passion in her words. A few more claps erupted, hesitant at first, but building like waves crashing onto the shore. Grace permitted herself a smile, she felt less alone. And what about my grandchildren? The grandmother chimed in, her voice gaining strength as she spoke. What kind of future are we leaving for them? We must teach them that everyone deserves love. Yes. Another voice shouted from the back. Our children deserve to grow up in an inclusive town, one that celebrates each person's identity. With each declaration, the unsteady ground became more solid. Grace was buoyed by their unwavering support. It dawned on her that hope was indeed contagious. But Mayor Thompson's expression twisted into defiance. And what about the backlash? The whispers in the shadows? Darkness doesn't simply dissolve because we want it to. Maybe it's time we shine a light on the shadows, Henry countered, stepping forward with insistence. Hiding from the fear only fuels its power. What if we start by breaking the chains, one conversation at a time? The mayor hesitated, visibly agitated. His deep-set eyes darted around the room, taking in the faces lit with determination. It was no longer just a handful of supporters, the room was filling with people ready to stand behind Grace and Henry. Grace felt her pulse racing. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore, she was standing for everyone who had been pushed aside, who had been told they weren't enough. This is our chance, she urged, her voice rising. I believe that together, we can build a community where everyone can feel they belong. Fear can't win if we hold on to each other. As the energy shifted, applause arose again, louder this time, a unified roar that couldn't be drowned out. Grace's heart felt light, a warmth spreading through her. But just as that warmth enveloped her, the atmosphere shifted again. Mayor Thompson shook his head, a sardonic grin stretching across his face. Don't underestimate the lengths I will go to, whatever it takes to keep our tradition intact, he warned, his tone slippery and ominous. Grace's stomach dropped. The uncertainty that once seemed distant now loomed menacingly close. What consequences would they face? The darkness he hinted at felt real, creeping closer as she stood in the shifting tide of the crowd. Would their bravery hold strong against the backlash that was surely coming? With her heart hammering in her chest, Grace looked at the people around her, the newfound spirit igniting within her, as they prepared to embrace whatever lay ahead. Could their love really be enough to change the course of their town, or would they all face the wrath of tradition in ways they hadn't anticipated? The hall buzzed with a mix of fear and hope, as if it were a living entity. Grace could hear the chatter, a rising tide of voices murmuring encouragement and concern. She felt a surge of energy as the crowd responded, but just below that, a steady pulse of doubt throbbed. What would Mayor Thompson do next? He scanned the room, his cool veneer crumbling as he grappled with the unexpected momentum against him. Grace could see the wheels turning behind his narrowed eyes. He seemed to catch sight of the elderly woman who had just spoken, and something shifted within him. You think love alone can fix all this? He barked back. You don't know the lengths people will go to when they feel threatened. No, but I know the lengths folks will go to for what they love, Henry shot back, stepping closer to Grace's side. His voice was calm but resonated with fire. When are we going to stop letting fear dictate our future? We're the community, not you. Together, our love can drown out any darkness. Grace looked at Henry, their eyes locking, his unwavering strength electrifying her resolve. They were fighting the good fight, one that could empower Maplewood. But the mayor's words twisted in her stomach. Would they truly be prepared for the fallout of their actions? Let us be honest, people, the mayor said, waving an arm in a dramatic fashion that seemed almost rehearsed. The minute you try to lift the veil of inclusion, you might end up losing the very essence of this town. Look around. Look at your neighbors. Are they ready for this? The crowd grew restless, fidgeting in their seats. Grace held her breath as she could see doubt begin to re-emerge on the faces of some. There was a subtle, unsettling shift as a few heads nodded in reluctant agreement. No. Grace shouted, her voice ringing out fiercely. This isn't just about our neighbors, this is about our children, our future. Are we truly content allowing fear to guide us into decay? We owe it to the next generation to teach them love. Let us not repeat the mistakes of the past. Light applause blossomed from the corners of the room, tentative but hopeful. Grace felt that surge of courage again, pushing against the shadows threatening to overcast their spirits. This is Maplewood. We are resilient, we are strong, and we can choose to be better. She continued, her heart racing as her hope bled into every word. What if we could be the example? What if unity made us stronger? Let us embrace diversity for what it is, a journey worth taking. Henry stepped with her, and the rush of solidarity rang loud, as if their voices were entwining in a dance of aspiration. The mayor was being pressed, his arrogance starting to falter. He scowled, tightening his jaw as his grip on the podium tightened. In that moment, a hand raised among the crowd. It was the grandmother, a fire sparking in her old, wise eyes. I've seen enough hate in my lifetime, she said, her voice resolute. I refuse to let my grandchildren drown in it. I choose love. The applause erupted again, this time washing over Grace and filling her with warmth. But just as the energy peaked, the mayor's voice slashed through the excitement. You think this is just a matter of choice? This is about survival. I'd say it's time to prepare for a wake-up call. An uneasy silence fell, causing Grace's heart to plummet. What would that wake-up call look like? As the words hung heavy in the air, the crowd turned, many whispering in hushed tones, eyes darting nervously. Grace's stomach twisted, the dawning realization settling in this wasn't just a conversation anymore. It was a battle line drawn. Could love really conquer a storm that felt so imminent, or were they stepping into a darkness that would consume them all? The atmosphere in the hall shifted like dark clouds looming over a sunlit field. Grace felt a heaviness pressing against her chest as whispers slid through the audience. Eyes widened, and brows furrowed, creating a tapestry of uncertainty. She could sense the momentum turning, fear was tightening its vice grip. Henry stood firm beside her, resolve radiating from him as he scanned the crowd. "We will not be shaken," he shouted, his voice breaking through the tension like a bell tolling, calling everyone back from the edge. "Remember why we're here." One by one, heads lifted. Grace watched faces react as more people began to stand, encouraged by Henry's courage. "This is our home," a woman shouted, her voice ringing clear amid the murmur. "We matter. Our voices matter." Behind the podium, Mayor Thompson faltered, throwing a quick glance over his shoulder. For a brief moment, Grace saw a flicker of fear grip him, a fleeting crack in his steel demeanor. But he was quick to recover, adopting a challenging stance. "You think this is about us?" he sneered. "It's about safety. You think love can shield our children when the world outside is dark? Will you continue to let that darkness in?" Grace challenged, stepping forward. Her legs trembled, but the fire in her belly pushed her onward. "Will you keep choosing fear when we could be fighters for love?" Breaths caught in the crowd as they hesitated, grappling with the daunting question. Tension surged through each of them, grappling with a choice they couldn't ignore. Could love win? What would that even look like? "Look, we all face difficulties," the grandmother interjected again, her voice steady and clear. "But we'll face them together. If we don't stand for our values now, we'll lose everything." A wave of agreement coursed through the hall, uniting stranger with stranger, neighbor with neighbor. Grace could feel a pulse of energy rising like the hum of an engine, gathering strength. As the applause thundered again, Grace's heart swelled. The momentum was shifting back, they were reclaiming the narrative. People began chanting slogans of unity and love, voices lifting into a beautiful chorus. Henry reached for Grace's hand, intertwining their fingers, and it felt electric. But the mayor would not yield easily. "You all think you're noble," he snapped, frustration evident in his tone. "But I'm the one who is protecting you. When the first sign of trouble arises, it's these ideals of yours that won't keep your kids safe." His words hung heavily in the air like a storm warning. An unsettling chill crept into Grace's mind. She squeezed Henry's hand tight, letting his warmth counter the growing anxiety whispering doubts in her ears. "We are ready to fight back," she declared, her voice rising above the crowd once more. "We will stand firm together. Love makes us stronger, not weaker. We will create safety in unity." The applause swelled again, but Grace could see some faces still barely convinced. Could they truly hold their ground against the mayor's looming threat? As the crowd regained its strength, she could sense a turning tide. But what would the mayor's wake-up call entail? Would it be a blow to their spirits or would it ignite a fire of resilience they never knew they had? Just then, in the back of the hall, a loud crash echoed, followed by a piercing scream. The crowd gasped, a wave of uncertainty pulsing through. What now? Grace's heart raced, caught between fear and determination. As they turned to face the commotion, her breath hitched in her throat. Were they prepared to face whatever darkness was coming? The crowd shifted nervously, eyes darting to the back of the hall where the sound had erupted. Grace felt an icy dread squeeze her heart. She thought of the little ones, those bright-eyed children who had come with their parents, believing in a night filled with dreams and hope. Henry tugged on her hand, drawing her closer to him. "Stay strong," he whispered, his voice calm but urgent. From the back, a figure staggered forward. A young boy, no older than 10, stumbled toward the front, tears streaming down his cheeks. The room fell silent, every pair of eyes fixated on him, awaiting an explanation. "What happened?" the grandmother asked gently, her voice cutting through the tension like a warm knife through cold butter. He gasped for breath, clutching his side. They're here. They broke in. With those words, panic rippled through the audience. Gasps and murmurs filled the air as people turned to one another, uncertainty blooming like a dark flower. Who broke in? Grace asked, her voice trembling. She knew fear could fester, and she needed to keep it at bay, if only for a moment longer. The shadows, the boy stammered, looking around wildly as if they might leap out from behind the curtains. They're everywhere. The mayor's face contorted into a mask of triumph. See? This is what happens when you let hope blind you. You think love can protect you from the darkness when, in fact, it invites it in. The crowd wavered, some stepping back, a few retreating toward the exits. Grace felt Henry's grip on her tighten. Don't let them scatter, he said, scanning the room for any signs of doubt. Gathering her resolve, Grace stepped forward. This boy is scared, and understandably so. But we can't let fear drown out our voices. We stand together. She paused, searching the crowd, each face reflecting the struggle between hope and despair. One by one, a few familiar faces stood taller. We will not be swayed, called an older man with wild gray hair. His voice sparked a small fire. Another voice chimed in, then another, until the hall echoed with chants of solidarity once more. But it wasn't enough to fully chase away the shadows looming at the edges of their minds, the creeping thoughts, the question of what awaited them if the mayor continued his campaign of fear. I need you to trust me, Grace said, her voice steady despite the raging storm inside her chest. We can face anything together. Love is our shield, but we have to show that we won't back down. The applause started slowly, hesitant at first, as if the audience were testing the waters of their courage. Yet, as each rhythmic clap built into a swell of noise, Grace felt it ignite a flicker of hope amid the unsettling darkness. A movement at the back caught her eye. Something shifted, and she squinted past the throng. Shadows danced and flickered. Were they really there, or was it all an illusion? What does it mean? She wondered aloud, the question flitting unceremoniously from her lips. Without warning, the boy stretched his arm, pointing into the half-lit expanse of the hall. They're here, he cried, fear stark across his small face. And then she saw them, figures cloaked in darkness, moving with a purpose that sent a chill down her spine. They were not mere figments of a child's imagination, they were a threat. This was no longer just a fight for ideals. It was about to become a battle for survival. Grace's heart raced as her stomach coiled with dread. What would happen when the darkness met the light of their courage? Would they stand resolute, or crumble under the weight of the shadows? For every ounce of bravery, doubt loomed like a lion waiting to pounce. And just then, as the crowd braced themselves for the unknown, another crash shattered the tension. What lay behind that door would define not just their night, but perhaps their future. The sound of splintering would echo through the hall, drowning out the murmurs of fear that had been building among the crowd. Each person flinched, heads turning toward the source, all minds racing with the dread of what might follow. The shadows stirred in response, a dark wave embodying the very fear that had begun to grip their hearts. Grace felt Henry's hands tighten instinctively around hers, grounding her even as a sense of panic began to swirl in her chest. Keep them focused, he whispered urgently, his eyes darting around, scanning for any movement among the crowd. She nodded, knowing that holding everyone's attention was crucial. What is happening? A voice called from the back, a shaky tone that carried the collective worry within the hall. Grace took a breath, trying to steady her shaking hands. It's time to show them our strength. She called out, her voice quaking but determined. She stepped forward, projecting authority, feeling the power of the moment press against her chest. We cannot let them divide us. Remember, together we are stronger. Together we can face anything. Another crash rang out, more vigorous than the last. The room went still as dread pooled in their hearts, everyone holding their breath, expecting the worst. The shadows at the edges of the hall flickered and danced, some whispering snippets of dark promises that felt like ice on their souls. "Grace!" Henry shouted, urgency transforming his tone. She turned instinctively to see a figure dragging itself into view, emerging from the shadows. It was cloaked in darkness, indistinct at first, but as it neared the light, she could see the glimmer in its eyes. What are you?" she stammered, stepping back instinctively. Her heart hammered against her chest, the tension palpable. The figure chuckled, a haunting sound that sent chills down her spine. "You think you can resist?" it hissed, its voice as cold as the shadows it commanded. "Hope is a fragile thing, little one. It gives light, yes, but it also creates shadows." A gasp passed through the crowd. Grace clenched her fists, feeling the weight of their despair threatening to crush her spirit. "Not if we stand together," she shouted back defiantly. "You'll find nothing but strength in unity." The figure paused, taken aback by her response. The crowd around her surged to life, spurred on by her boldness. Voices rose, chanting words of courage, filling the hall with defiance. "Stand tall. Stand true." But beneath that wave of voices, a sliver of doubt crept into Grace's mind. What if their strength wasn't enough? What if the shadows were too powerful? Suddenly, the shadows behind the figure broadened and deepened. More figures began to emerge, cloaked and unyielding. Chaos flickered in the crowd as some voices turned to screams. People shifted uneasily, the urge to flee battling against their newfound solidarity. The mayor stood on the edge of the chaos with a twisted grin, shouting his own words of division. "See? They've come. This is what you wanted. A night filled with hope. Hope is nothing but an invitation to despair." "No!" Grace screamed, desperation painting her voice. "We're not afraid of the shadows because we have each other. We will fight for our light. We will not let them win." Just then, another crash reverberated through the hall, but this time it brought with it a flicker of brightness. Hope, radiant and untamed, surged through the crowd, igniting a fire in their hearts. She could feel it, a palpable energy, a connection that ran deeper than fear. "What will we do?" Henry yelled, joining in, trying to rally the crowd toward unity. "We will stand our ground," Grace affirmed, her voice rising above the tumult. "We will fight, together. For every ounce of light we have." The figures hesitated, uncertainty crossing their azure faces. They weren't expecting resistance, they had only anticipated surrender. But would it be enough? The shadows loomed on the precipice of engulfing them all. An uneasy thrill danced in her veins. As the crowd surged forward, emboldened by Grace's words, another figure stepped up. Beside her, an unexpected ally against the shadows, one who could shift the tide in their favor. "Who goes there?" she called, fear mingling with hope as she set her eyes on the stranger. And in that moment, with the weight of every soul in the room hanging in the balance, she realized this was just the beginning. The air in the gala hall surged with energy, each heartbeat echoing with hope and fear. As the shadowy figures advanced, Grace felt her heart thump loudly in her chest, but the growing chorus of determined voices around her steadied her resolve. "Together!" she shouted, locking eyes with Henry, who stood like a steadfast lighthouse in the storm. They were all on the precipice of change, and their spirit intertwined as tightly as their fingers. Suddenly, the figure that had stepped up beside Grace, a woman cloaked in radiant light rather than darkness, lifted her chin defiantly. "I am Clara," she announced, her voice bold and clear, radiating warmth. "I've seen the shadows too, and I know their truth. They thrive on division, they feed on our fears. But what they don't realize is that true strength is found in unity." The crowd silenced, attention shifting to Clara as they absorbed her words. The shadows hesitated, uncertainty flickering in their depths. Clara stepped forward, her aura shimmering like a beacon. She faced the advancing threats, her voice unwavering. "You think you can silence love? Look at them. She gestured to the crowd. This isn't just about fear anymore. Their hearts are filled with courage. They will not back down. Grace felt a surge of belief swelling within her. Was this the moment they had all been waiting for? The night of true transformation, where hope collided with darkness in a spectacular show of resilience. Yes. The crowd echoed, their voices weaving together like a tapestry. We are stronger together. As the figures in shadows surged forward, they were greeted by a wave of courage as hands intertwined a human chain united against the encroaching gloom. We want to let you take our hope. Someone in the back yelled, and the words pierced through the tension like a vibrant spear. The spirit of collective defiance swelled, branching out further into the room. With newfound determination, Grace stepped up beside Clara, their presence merging into a powerful force. This is our town. We define what it means to belong here, and we choose love. The shadows flickered, as if debating their next move. Behind them, Mayor Thompson scowled, clenching his fists. You think your love can shield you from reality? You're naive to believe it can win. Grace turned to him, the fire of defiance blazing in her eyes. It's time to wake up, Mayor. Reality can be rewritten. We hold the pen, and our ink is love and acceptance. The crowd erupted in applause, and as their cheers resonated against the walls, it felt as if the very foundation of the building shook with their unity. The shadows wavered, and something changed in the atmosphere. Love is powerful, Clara reiterated boldly, but it's also a choice. We can choose to stand in the light or let the darkness define us. In that moment, Grace held her breath as she watched the shadows recoil from the fervor radiating in the room. Would they shatter in the face of collective love? Or would they cling to their power, ready to try and disperse the growing courage threatening to engulf them? As the room buzzed alive with strength, Clara raised her hands. Let us show them who we really are. Show them the light. Shine bright. The audience erupted, a cheer rising in crescendo, merging into an overwhelming display of resilience. Grace's heart raced, a wild anthem thrumming through her being. For everyone. She shouted, her voice ringing true. For those who have felt invisible, for every child waiting for a brighter future, we will shine. The shadows, momentarily paralyzed, squirmed like ghosts caught in an eternal dawn. As the brightness swelled, an eruption of color came alive in the hall, illuminating faces filled with determination and love. One by one, individuals stepped forward, their mouths moving in unison, chanting phrases of hope, acceptance, and community, drowning out the darkness. The mayor, sensing the slipping control he had fought to maintain, clenched his jaw, eyes narrowed. You are playing with fire. You will bring ruin upon this town. But Grace felt the unyielding power shoot through her veins. No. She proclaimed. Together, we have the power to build something new. We will not allow you to instill fear in us any longer. As the shadows lurched in retreat, an unexpected crack in the darkness exploded into light, illuminating every heart in the room. The collective breaths, the unity, the refusal to conceal or shy away from what they all truly believed, they formed a wall of resilience that began to consume the last remnants of darkness. And then, as if the very walls of Maplewood had shifted, joy erupted. Laughter, tears, applause, and shouts of triumph filled the hall. Grace turned to Henry, who wore a radiant smile, his eyes shimmering with pride. Together, they had fought for the invisible sister, for inclusivity, for a future where love flourished over fear. They felt a profound shift within Maplewood, as the essence of acceptance wrapped around their community like a warm embrace. We did it! Tommy shouted, breaking into laughter, his joy infectious. Caroline felt her heart swell as she watched her children bask in the beauty of their hard-won victory. In that moment of pure ecstasy, the mayor stepped back, clear he could not overpower the tide of hope. The shadows began to dissolve, receding into whispers, shrinking against the fervor of newfound kinship. And as the gala hall erupted into a chorus of voices and the dawn broke on a new Maplewood, Grace knew one undeniable truth: love would always triumph when they dared to stand together. The journey would continue, and challenges would arise, but the community they forged together would remain steadfast. Maplewood had changed forever, and every person present now carried the light of hope, ready to embrace their vibrant future, hand in hand. It was time to spread the message even wider. If you believe in the power of love, you need to subscribe now. Don't wait not even one more second to witness more transformations like Grace S. Leave a like now to help this story reach those who need it most. And comment your feelings about this ending because your voice matters. Share instantly with 5 friends who need to feel this hope. This is the moment to show your support for love and unity.